Good afternoon, students. Today, our topic of discussion is hypothesis. Hypothesis is usually considered as an important mechanism in research. It is a tentative assumption made in order to test its logical or empirical consequences. So it is usually considered as the principal instrument in research work. The derivation of a suitable hypothesis goes hand in hand with the selection of a research problem. Remember, the derivation of a suitable hypothesis goes hand in hand with the selection of a research problem. A hypothesis is a tentative hunch. A hypothesis as a tentative hunch explains the situation under observation. So, a hypothesis as a tentative hunch explains the situation under observation so as to design the study to prove or to disprove it. What a researcher is looking for is a working or positive hypothesis. So it's very difficult, laborious, and time consuming to make adequate discriminations in the complex interplay of facts and hypotheses. It gives definite point and direction to the study, prevents blind search and indiscriminate gathering of data by the researcher, and help to delimit the fields of inquiry. So, this is a tentative hunch, explains the situation under observation so as to design the study to prove or disprove it. So, what a researcher is looking for is a working or positive hypothesis. It's very difficult, laborious, and time consuming to make adequate discriminations in the complex interplay of facts and hypotheses. It gives definite point and direction to your study. It prevents blind search. It helps you to be on the track, and indiscriminate, and definitely helps you to prevent indiscriminate gathering of data, and helps to delimit the field of your inquiry. let's discuss its meaning. The word hypothesis is derived from the Greek word. So remember, it is derived from the Greek word hypothenai, meaning to put under, which means to put under or to suppose. Suppose it is like that. Suppose it is related to this. Suppose it is something this. So it is to put under or to suppose. For a hypothesis to be put forward as scientific hypothesis. So to suppose for a hypothesis to be put forward as a scientific hypothesis. The scientific method requires that one can test it. The scientific method requires that one can test it. So, etymologically, hypothesis is made up of two words. First is hypo, less than, and thesis. So, which means less than or less certain than a thesis. So, it is the presumptive statement of a proposition or a reasonable guess by the researcher. So, based upon the available evidence which the researcher seeks to prove through his study. According to Lundberg, a hypothesis is a tentative generalization. A hypothesis is a tentative generalization, the validity of which remains to be tested. This is a tentative generalization, the validity of which remains to be tested. In its most elementary stage, the hypothesis may be any hunch, guess, imaginative idea which becomes the basis for action or investigation. This is a proposition which can be put to test to determine its validity. A proposition which can be put to test to determine its validity. A hypothesis is a statement temporarily accepted, you can say it like this, temporarily accepted in the light of what is at the time known about a phenomenon. So it is employed as a basis for action in the search of new truth. So a hypothesis is a tentative assumption drawn from knowledge and theory which is used as a guide in the investigation of other facts and theories that are yet unknown or which needs to be explored. It is a guess, supposition, or tentative inference as to the existence of some fact, condition, or relationship relative to some phenomenon which serves to explain such facts as already are known to exist in a given area of research and to guide the research for new truth. Hypothesis reflect the research worker's guess as to the probable outcome of his or her experiments. So, what is it? Researchers' best guess so as to the probable outcome of his or her experiments. A hypothesis is therefore a shrewd and intelligent guess. What is it? A shrewd and intelligent guess. A supposition, inference, hunch, provisional statement, or tentative generalization as to the existence of some fact, condition, or relationship relative to some phenomenon which serves to explain already known facts in a given area of research and to guide the search for new truth on the basis of empirical evidence. The hypothesis is put to test for its tenability and for determining its validity. In this connection, Lundberg observes quite often a research hypothesis is a predictive statement. According to Lundberg, quite often a research hypothesis is a predictive statement capable of being tested by scientific methods that relates an independent variable to some dependent variable that relates an independent variable to some dependent variable. For example, consider you can consider statements like the students who receive counseling will show a greater increase in creativity than students than not receiving counseling, or students who receive or encouraged will show a greater increase in their creativity than students not receiving encouragement. Or there is a positive relationship between academic aptitude scores and scores on a social adjustment inventory for high school students. So hypotheses are capable of being objectively verified and tested. So, hypothesis states what we are looking for, and it is a proposition which can be put to test to determine its validity. Importance of hypothesis. The importance of hypothesis is generally recognized more in the studies which aim to make predictions about some outcome. The importance of hypothesis is generally recognized more in the studies which aim to make predictions about some outcome. So the importance is generally recognized more in the studies which aim to make predictions about some outcome. So in experimental research, the researcher is interested in making predictions. In experimental research, the researcher is interested in making predictions about the outcome of the experiment or what the results are expected to show, and therefore the rule of hypothesis is considered to be of utmost importance. In the historical or descriptive research, on the other hand, the researcher is investigating the history of a city or a nation, the life of a man, the happening of an event, or is seeking facts to determine the status of some situation and thus may not have a basis for making a prediction of results. A hypothesis, therefore, may not be required in fact finding studies. So, formation of hypothesis is not required in fact finding studies. Haley too is of the view that when fact finding alone is the aim of study, a hypothesis may not be required. Most historical or descriptive studies, however, involve not only fact finding but interpretation of facts to draw generalizations. If a researcher is tracing the history of an educational institution or making a study about the results of a coming assembly poll, the facts or data he gathers will prove useful only if he is able to draw generalization from the results. So, if a researcher is tracing the history of an educational institution or making a study about the result of a coming assembly poll, like you might have watched it on television, the facts or data he gathers will prove useful only if he is able to draw generalizations from them. Whenever possible, a hypothesis is recommended for major studies to explain observed facts, condition, or behavior and to serve as a guide in the research process. So, its importance like hypotheses facilitate the extension of knowledge in an area. It facilitates the extension of knowledge in an area. They provide tentative solution, tentative explanation of facts and phenomena, and can be tested and validated. It sensitizes the investigator or to certain aspects of situations which are relevant from the standpoint of problem in hand. Hypotheses provide the researcher with rational statements. It provides the researcher with rational statements consisting of elements expressed in a logical order of relationships which seek to describe or to explain conditions or events that have not yet been confirmed by facts. The hypothesis enable the researcher to relate logically known facts to intelligent guesses about unknown conditions. So it is a guide to the thinking process of a researcher and the process of discovery. It is investigator's eye, a sort of guiding light in the work of darkness. Number three, hypothesis provides direction to the research. So it provides direction to your research. It defines what is relevant and what is irrelevant. The hypotheses tell the researcher specifically what he needs to do and find out in his study. The hypotheses tell the researcher specifically what he needs to do and find out in his study. So it prevents the review of it prevents the review of irrelevant literature and the collection of useless or extra data which are of no use for the researcher. So it helps you keep on the track. Hypotheses provide a basis for selecting the example and and the research procedure to be used in the study. The statistical techniques needed in the analysis of data and the relationships between the variables to be tested are also implied by the hypothesis. So hypotheses help the researcher to delimit his study in a scope so that it does not become broad or unwieldy. So hypotheses provide the basis for reporting the conclusions of the study. Hypothesis provides the basis for reporting the conclusions of the study. It serves as a framework for drawing conclusions. The researcher will find it very convenient to test each hypothesis separately and state the conclusions that are relevant to each. So, on the basis of these conclusions, he can make the research report interesting and meaningful to the reader. Interesting and meaningful to the reader. It provides the outline for setting conclusions in a meaningful way. So it has a very important place in research, although it occupies a very small place in the body of a thesis. It is almost impossible for a research worker not to have one or more hypotheses before proceeding with his or her work. In my next session, we will discuss another topic, sources of hypothesis.